This week, the Supreme Court took up a case, and the plan for this case was to allow the Supreme Court to do what they started to do with the destruction of Roe v. Wade and take another step to destroying access to the reproductive freedoms that you've probably come to expect through the course of your life. In this case, destroying access to medication abortion. But so far, it looks like the plan is not exactly coming together. Now, the origins of this is you have a group of doctors who notably are not required to prescribe the medication abortion. So you might think, well, then what's their dog in this fight? And that's something the Supreme Court is gonna ask them. But they say they've experienced harm because they treat patients who've experienced side effects from it. So even though they themselves didn't have to take it, they didn't have to prescribe it, it really has nothing to do with them. They were once near a person who took it. So can we ban it nationwide? And that seems like a really weird case to make. And I'm not just saying that. Even the conservative Supreme Court seems to be thinking that. So we want to start off with a little bit of an interaction between Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and apparently the lawyer who is the Erin Hawley, the wife of Josh Hawley. So let's take a look at how that went.
If we were to find that there are conscientious objections that say hospitals take them into account and these doctors do have a way to not do these kinds of procedures, should we end this case on that basis?
No, Your Honor, we would welcome that holding, but it's not broad enough to remedy our doctors' harm.
Why?
Because these are emergency situations. They can't waste precious moments scrubbing in.
No. I'm saying assuming we have a world in which they can actually lodge the objections that you say that they have. My question is, isn't that enough to remedy their issue? Do we have to also entertain your argument that no one else in the world can have this drug, or no one else in America should have this drug in order to protect your clients?
Yeah, so as you saw in the first bit, she's not gonna answer that because she has a difficult job. She has to take people who don't really have any standing to advocate for a judgment from the Supreme Court that goes way, way, way miles beyond anything having to do with what the doctors even comically claim is the harm that they're suffering. And it isn't just the Democratic, the so-called liberal justices who are getting involved in this. We have Neil Gorsuch as well. Let's take a look at that.
Given the emergency nature of these situations.
Counsel, let me interrupt there. I'm sorry. I think Justice Jackson's saying, and let's spot you all that, okay? With respect to your clients. Normally in Article 3, traditional equitable remedies, we issue and we say over and over again, provide a remedy sufficient to address the plaintiff's asserted injuries and go no further. We have before us a handful of individuals who've asserted a conscience objection. Normally, we would allow equitable relief to address them. Recently, I think what Justice Jackson's alluding to, we've had, one might call it a rash of universal injunctions or vacatures. And this case seems like a prime example of turning what could be a small lawsuit into a nationwide legislative assembly on an FDA rule or any other federal government action.
Okay, so it took him way too long to get through his point. But the point is that you're claiming a harm that you want to be relieved from. Why is it not enough that we simply stop you from being harmed in that way? Why is it that we take this and then we elevate it to effectively kind of a quasi act of Congress, where rather than having the normal legislative procedure wherein a particular medication is gonna be banned, you just say you don't like that other people took it and we're suddenly going to ban it. And that is what they're trying to do. It looks like some of the conservatives are not interested in that. We might get to Chief Justice John Roberts. Others seem like they do want to do this, but it would look really bad if they were to accept the argument that these doctors are making. Sam Alito in particular, specifically asks, is there not someone who has better standing in this case? But anyway, that's how it's looking right now. Sharon, I'm curious what you think about this. Do you accept the consensus that it doesn't look like they're gonna ban access to this medication, which has been available for many years, is available, across the world? What do you think?
I think women may at least get to keep something. Okay, it looks like they will not do this, although I think you're right, Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito would love to. They kind of danced with it just a little bit. But this is This is so silly. When you think about it, what they're really saying here is, well, if it's my ball and I'm not willing to play, and so nobody else can play with it. But I gotta ask too, how does this case get to the highest court in the land? The arguments now with this ridiculous Supreme Court are so lazy. They're not even trying to play it off. This was a terrible case. This is a terrible job because they think it's just going to be green lighted. Just green light the thing and get us, dial it back until, the roaring 20s or something, and women will have no rights again. That's how lazy this argument was.
100%. Yeah, and look, maybe they're crazy enough to take it up, but not crazy enough in this particular case to actually rule the way these insane doctors want them to. But let's bear in mind, they already killed Roe v. Wade. Like they're insane. They're everything the right spent the last 50 years saying they don't want the Supreme Court to be. They're activists. They're taking the place of the Senate and the House of Representatives and delivering effectively legislative solutions to right-wing grievances and culture war issues. That's all it is, which means that the only solution is going to be, it's not like, us pointing out their hypocrisy or their ethical, violations and things like that is not going to solve a problem because they don't answer to literally anyone. The only solution is to replace the bad ones with ones who are less bad. And that is a battle that is going to have to be waged over the course of many, many years. Now, it can start coming up in the next 4 years. And I don't necessarily mean that if Biden gets in, he'll get spots on the Supreme Court. That is not guaranteed. But if Trump wins, then you could have some early retirements from some of the incredibly old justices, and they'll be replaced with completely out of their mind 40-year-old, right-wing evangelical zealots. So the battle continues every single day. Even if this case goes the way it should, if common sense, exists, it doesn't mean that the battle won't continue on into November.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.